What's up, outliers? Quick general market update. Then I want to talk about PANW, and then we'll take a look at GameStop. So let's get right into it. What happened today? Well, a slight down day, the first one that we've seen in a little while now for the S&P 500 for the Qs, and for the Russell, it's still the weakest of the bunch by far. So I'm seeing a few things. As you could tell, the red volume, which is the sale volume, is definitely ticking up here. And we're still seeing volume contracting. So what's to be derived from that? As per usual, don't know just yet, but it is kind of confirmation to me that this isn't necessarily a straight V-shaped recovery from low to high. Does this mean that we start transacting sideways a little bit? That would not surprise me at all. And it's because, as you could tell, for specifically the Qs, we've just bumped into the point of control. A lot of people are wanting to transact there. For something like the Russell, it just can't catch a big bid. It is struggling here. And we still have the S&P 500 outperforming to the upside. So the other thing I noticed from a broader perspective is the variance risk premiums here have been contracting pretty meaningfully, interestingly enough, for the 30-day vols in the S&P 500, which I find curious, but it's not surprising with the VIX being so suppressed here. It did catch a little bit of a bid today. So I'm already out of my fade VIX position and I'm reloaded, always looking to get back into that as soon as the time looks good. But right now, VIX is so low, this is not somewhere that I personally would look to fade it. So broad market, fascinating. What's going on here? It's still making this really aggressive recovery. We're seeing net highs, lows for the NASDAQ turning positive and maintaining positive. Whereas for IWM, they've been positive for a while, and we're just not seeing the strong continuation that's being seen in large cap stocks. So right now I'm still positioned long market in general. And I have both long futures in the E-minis, and then I still have the T-triple-Q's position that I'm actually starting to pare down. And that position will morph a little bit, likely rotate that into NASDAQ futures in the not so distant future. The reason why I'm using the 3 times is because when you get these really strong, persistent one directional moves, that compounding of a 3 times daily return is actually pretty lucrative. But for general carry positions, futures or the indices themselves are typically fairly effective. So I'm agnostic to which of those I'll end up rotating into. But for something like T-triple-Qs, I have no problem holding it for some time, but it's not something that I would just close my eyes and hold forever. And it's just because I'm not really interested in going through the full cycle that it can present to you, which can be pretty nasty. Even recently, it's gone from 85 down to 48. Just a big move. And unfortunately, there's no tax advantage for something like T-triple-Qs. Whereas if you're trading the indices themselves, which the NASDAQ index is super illiquid, the option, so I don't trade that. But the NASDAQ futures are kind of the next best choice there. So that's probably what I will rotate into. So now let's take a quick look at just the market events for today, because not a ton went down. The 20th was really quiet. We had a couple Fed speakers. Tomorrow is when it starts to get a little more interesting. So we have the Fed meeting minutes, which I think is going to be a slightly bigger deal. Now, the other thing I wanted to pull up really quick is PANW. And Palo Alto Networks just had a banger of an earnings. It was estimated at 0.768, came in at 151. Moderate gap up, but a big up move on the day. So this starts to look attractive from a post-earnings announcement drift style play to the upside. So I established a small position on the gap up, expecting a continuation. And essentially the way that I'll run this is I haven't decided if I'm going to have a hard stop right here and keep it really, really speculative, meaning high probability of being stopped out, or if I want to give it a little more room to run and take it down below these lows. I actually have that for an action item to figure out and kind of dial it in. It's one of those two, but I just need to see which one fits with the broader portfolio better. And then near-term target, I want to see it break above this volume node that you see here on the 1 year. We move this into a 6 month. It's kind of like this big chunky block, but there's just not a lot of overhead resistance here. So this looks like a interesting run out play to me, but you can see that on a relative volume time frame, it's hundreds of percents magnitude over 20-day, 10-day, 5-day, just big volume expansion the last couple of days around earnings. So this just looks generally interesting to me. And then the last one, GME. And then for those that don't know, we have a live stream today at 5 p.m. Pacific time, and we'll go through really whatever you guys want to talk about, but the market's a little more in depth as we get closer to that. But a couple of things stick out to me here in GameStop. The first thing, a little bit of a down day. And I do notice that on the down day, one of the pieces I've been really interested to see is what does the volume look like on a down day versus an up day? And I was actually pleasantly surprised that the volume was pretty light today. So the volume yesterday was 4.5 million. The volume today is 3.5. So a little bit of a down day is okay. Again, because the Russell's down. So essentially the broader index that it's tied to is down. Now, I'm glad that there wasn't a really aggressive increase in pressure, but there's just not much going on here, right? Like, again, like I'm not here to church things up. I'm not here to try to make things better than they are or worse than they are. I'm trying to look at it as objectively as I can. It's just not much is going on here. We've had a decent move, to be clear. Like this is essentially taking something from 19 to 22. That's not nothing of a move, but it's nothing I'm excited about for sure. And it's kind of still maintaining this just consolidation trend. We can see this volume node continues to get built out further and further, and it's just because we're running essentially sideways. So this looks interesting because it's kind of like contra to what I'm seeing in Chewy leading into Chewy earnings. So going into Chewy earnings, again, down day across the general smaller cap, mid cap universe. So this doesn't surprise me, but you can see leading into earnings, it's been kind of aggressively moving up on a relative basis, going from 20 to now closing today at 26. So a slightly different tenor in the style of move is what I'm seeing here. Now, from an options perspective, we saw a pretty significant build out in the OI. So if we look at the volume, there was only 87,000 calls transacted against 16,000 puts. So light for GameStop standards. Open interest is still very light for GameStop standards, but it's already essentially at 2-to-1 for calls to puts. So people are putting on more put positions. I'm sorry, more call positions than put positions, which I do find interesting. And the other more interesting part here is notice how it's not centralized in this front expiration. This is still new. This is an anomaly in GameStop from when I first started tracking the product. It's not even in the 30 AUG. It's not even in the 6 SEP. It's all over the place. But you can definitely see 18 October, which is the green boxes, definitely large and in charge. It has a dominant presence. So that I find very curious. The fact that these 18 Oct expirations, which is 60 days out, is starting to get so active in terms of depth of open interest. Now, the other thing I do want to note is for the earnings, which again is still coming up on the 4th before the open, and vol is like going down. It's crazy. Vol has been so strange for this earnings release. I'm still bullish in vol for 6 SEP, but it's a little too far out still for me to play it, although I do intend to as it gets a little bit closer. But I would expect this vol to start guiding up a little bit as we're coming into earnings. So the fact that this has been so light has been really interesting to me. And the last thing I want to show you is just from our friends over at Unusual Whales, which I do have a discount code for you guys. If you're interested, I do get some sort of commission. I actually have no idea what it is, but just in case you like the tool, otherwise I'll show it to you right here. And what I'm seeing is just light volume, right? So I see 100,000, 100,000, 100,000, 100,000, and that's kind of split between calls at the bid, calls at the offer, and puts at the bid. So there's not a bunch of big trades coming through right now, which kind of falls in line with the broader picture I was just explaining, that things seem generally quiet. So as you know, your boy's keeping a close eye on it, but I don't have really anything significant to report right now. IV percentile is insanely low for GameStop. So it is just a function of keep an eye on it, and we'll see what it does. As always, any questions or anything that you want me to take a look at, let me know. I'll see you guys at the live session later today. Be an outlier.